Imagine a career that's all about traveling, a career that you choose after quitting a lucrative job. When you have zero cash in hand, but it's your dreams that are giving you a sleepless night. What makes a person think out of the box and think something like running a traveling club for women? If you did not know a women's club like such existed in India, then that's the owner of the club I'm going to talk to in our very first episode of the Changemakers of Mentogram. First of all, I would like to thank you, Piya Bose, for taking out time and joining us for the show. To start off, what made you come up with this club? You were doing a high paying job as a lawyer.
Hi, everybody. So I'm sitting right now in a beautiful natural setting in Auroville in Pondicherry. Most of you might know Auroville. It's a very interesting experimental township where people from all around the world, travelers, they all come here together to experiment with the future, evolution of humanity. Okay, so they have a lot of interesting activities out here, a lot of interesting opportunities for volunteering. So it's a perfect place for travelers to be. So this is where I am right now. So it's been quite a journey. Okay, so I started Girls on the Go in the year 2008 after quitting my job as a corporate lawyer. And frankly, when I was a lawyer, I really never ever thought I'm going to end up starting a venture for women. But when I join the dots now, I think it was just meant to be, because I have been traveling solo since I was 16 years of age, and my first trip was to South America as a Rotary exchange student, and that trip really opened up my horizons. It was a very formative period for me, and I had noticed that there were no Indian women really traveling on their own, even during that time. And much later, when I was in college, I also went for an internship to Malaysia, where again I found myself to be the only Indian woman traveling solo during that time. And I saw a lot of other women from other countries, much younger than me as well, who were traveling solo. So the thought obviously crossed my mind in terms of, why don't Indian women travel here? Because the safety aspects or other concerns that are globally applicable for women across all countries and all nationalities. So this was a thought that was playing at the back of my mind. But I did come back, did my legal career, and that was working as a corporate lawyer for some time. And then a string of events happened, after which I ended up just quitting my legal profession. And I went on a very impromptu overland trip to Nepal and then to Tibet. And I think that trip really shook up things for me. Tibet in particular, because that was the first country that I was traveling to, which was not politically independent. And, we take so much for granted in India and other free countries, things like democracy, fundamental rights, even things like free will. And that experience really made me realize that in India, anybody who wants to enter into any sort of entrepreneurial venture or a startup, there is nothing really stopping us politically from exploring what we want to do. We have free will. There is nobody stopping us and putting any restrictions on us that you can't start this, you can't start that, unless of course it's something illegal or whatever. So I came back with a very deep realization that I really want to experiment with this concept of free will and start something literally out of nothing, because we really don't understand the concept of free will deeply. We see it as just a very abstract concept. But that is the main thing which we really need to understand, in our country especially, that it's a huge asset that we have, which we can monetize with the correct processes and with the correct systems in place. Right? So that is how I actually ended up starting Girls on the Go. I did a few stints before that, a variety of stints. Like I worked for a gelato company for some time, did the marketing work. I even worked for a travel company for a little while just to get an understanding. I did a few stints, and I was also travel writing for some national newspapers during that time. So it was many dots that kind of. So all these dots finally joined in to finally one day lead to that moment of epiphany when I just suddenly realized that this is my calling. This is what I'm meant to. Because I, as a solo woman traveler, have been traveling around independently for several years, and the time has come for me to start sharing this bliss that I feel and this sense of independence and freedom that I feel when I'm traveling with other Indian women. So finally, in 2008 September, I finally started Girls in the Home, and I remember that time Facebook was also not really on the scene. We used to have Orkut, which was the earlier social media channel, and I wrote to several hundreds of women across the country, sharing with them that I'm looking to start this kind of a women's travel venture. And I got really, really enthusiastic responses from these women. And I figured that this is an idea whose time has come, and women are now willing to step out of their closets, so to speak, and really start traveling. They just wanted a forum like this to help them live out their travel dreams. And after that, there was no looking back. September 2008, I conducted the first trip to Ladakh, and there were about 18 of us women who traveled in the first trip. And since then, we've done a series of many trips in India and abroad. And yeah, it's been quite a journey. So yeah, that's the background of how I started going.
Okay, that's so lovely. So, you were telling me about the difficulties, the problems that you were facing along with this. So, with that, you understood you wanted to start with your own club, and you already told me how you did it. But you belong to an Indian family, right? So you were already doing better as a lawyer. You were already in a high paying job. How was the reaction of your family?
Okay, the reaction of the family, yeah. So they were, I think, frankly, a little confused because, and obviously quite concerned about me because I was really young. I was just 24, and I pretty much quit my legal, career just a very short while after I started, and it was really not common during that time. And for example, the corporate law firm where I went, it was a highly coveted firm where a lot of young law students wanted to get in. It used to pay us really, really well. So that was not the time when people really wanted to compromise with stability. Today things are very different. Today there are many people who are starting their startups, and a lot of youngsters even enter into college with the idea and the aim of starting something on their own. The climate was very different during that time. It was pretty much unheard of during that time to just give up a cushy law firm job in particular and just start something where you really don't know how it's going to turn out. So they came from a point of concern, but there were a lot of questions that were asked. There was a lot of resistance that was put up, and I was asked to reconsider maybe joining some other law firm or doing something else in the field of law, because law is seen as a very stable career option where you can't really go wrong with money as long as you're putting in your hours of work. But I think that was a time when it was like a test for me. How deeply and how strongly do I believe in this dream of helping women travel? And I really had to just kind of block out all the other noise and all the other suggestions and everybody's even good, well-meaning intentions, and really focus on the target. And I also figured that this is when I'm starting something new. It needs a lot of energy. It needs a lot of hard work, and I will not be in a position to ever do this later in life when I'm older. And I would just have a regret that I should have done this when I was younger. Whereas I had the backup of law. So my thing is that even if I by chance did not, succeed in this career option, maybe I could get back to law at some point. So I actually had nothing to lose by trying this out. But it was a very courageous, I had to take up a lot of courage on my end. It's a bold decision on my end to finally decide that I am going to make this transition and I am going to give myself this opportunity to start this venture. So yeah, so as far as family is concerned, they were skeptical, they were confused. But eventually later, when they did see that the trips were happening and the media reviews started happening, And I think some of their friends and other people came and said, okay, she's doing something. So with that validation coming in, slowly, they were able to accept it enough.
So people have already traveled with travel agencies with a mixed gender of people, and since you made it women only, how was it for you to travel with a bunch of ladies and ensuring everything goes well?
So this is a question that I actually get asked quite a bit, that, why are you doing it only for women? Why aren't you doing it for, all kinds of families and everything? Because the energy of these groups are different. Now, I'll give you like one or two examples actually, just to show you how, it is different. One is that women can really let their hair loose, and they can literally just be in their element without worrying about what the husband or father is going to think, or X number of different issues. So they can actually just be themselves. And like, I'll give you like an example of just shared very openly. So I once took a group of women to Spain. This was to Ibiza. Okay? And there was a lady who was 65 to 70, that age group, a very conservative Gujarati lady from Bombay, who signed up on a ship. Her son signed up for the trip. And we were going to party places like Ibiza, for instance. And he was like, why are you taking my mother to Ibiza? That's an adult party place. I said, you tell me something. If you were to go with your bunch of friends to Ibiza, wouldn't you go, to a pub or whatever, go to one of the parties or whatever? Wouldn't you do it? He's like, of course I would, but that's me. I'm like in my 40s or whatever. So I said, why do you think that your mother, who's in her 60s, would not want to also have that same kind of an experience? So I said, look, when I'm taking women traveling, I want them to have like a fully, it should be a wholesome experience. You don't just go into the beaches and the mountains and come back. You see all aspects of the city, you imbibe it, and then you decide which of it you want to keep in your mind, or you filter out whatever it is. But let's show them everything. Now, these kind of experiences, one finds it difficult to do within a family framework, because there'll be a lot of stereotypes on women, a lot of restrictions. You can't go here, you can't do that. I mean, there are times when men would go out like to a pub or something, but women will have to just go shopping or just go to a spa or do like the regular, more acceptable kind of things. So that is what I wanted to challenge. I'm like, why should boys have all the fun? Let's put it that way. Like, women should also be able to have all kinds of experiences. So I think the energy of women traveling together is very, very different. And contrary to popular notion that women cannot tolerate each other beyond a certain point, and there are always issues and all, it's really not true. Because like in any groups, there could be some issues here and there, but on the whole, like, these women actually end up being great friends. Most of the women who've traveled in the groups have ended up forming really long-lasting friendships, and it becomes a sort of like support structure for them to, continue to be in touch and, be there for each other even after, much after the trip is actually over. So there is a reason as to why women's trips have a very exclusive feel, and one has to be on the trip to really realize what this energy is all about.
Definitely. After listening to all this, sometimes I feel like I should join you, because I'm also a woman and I can join you to have some fun and to get out of my comfort zone and to see what these ladies are actually experiencing. So taking you back to the old days, like when your journey was on the way and you were going to just start with the club, you planned everything, your family was ready and everything else. So how did you find your first female customers? It might have not been easy for a startup to get someone's trust, especially when it comes to traveling with a group of unknown people. How did you get their trust?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, that this is the age before social media marketing was really the flavor. Okay, like Facebook had just about entered. Like, many people didn't even know about Facebook. I was using a social media site called Orkut, which was the more popular one at that point of time. So I'm like, I'm spending so much time actually social networking, and that time we were all young kids, and like, it's the norm. Like, you would get onto these sites and you would check out like hot guys and cool girls, like that kind of thing. As I'm wasting so much of energy doing that kind of thing, why not actually use this as a platform to actually start business network? So this idea actually came to me even before, like, social media marketing, or like before the social media was used as a business tool. That time it was purely social media only. So that's when I reached out to many women and I told them that I'm starting, and I got great feedback, like I mentioned a while back. So some of my first customers were actually from Orkut, and that was also the time when e-commerce was still not very well accepted. Like it was still very uncommon for people to really trust like somebody they haven't really met and just transfer online. Online payment gateways and all was not even on the horizon that time. So I'm talking about that point where people already had a bit of a trust issue with online platforms. Okay? But there was some sort of deep resonance that the few people who did trust me have with what I was saying to them and the kind of call for action that I gave to them. And I was myself very surprised that they responded so positively. That was one thing that happened. The second thing is, since I was working with a zero cash business model, so I was also challenging that idea, or rather experimenting with it. So I also looked up like free listings in newspapers. Like there was Midday, for instance, and Time Out and other magazines which had free listings with very prominent, positioning of ads. So I started placing ads in those columns, and I got great feedback from those as well. And because of that, it also got media visibility. So when, for example, Midday got to know that there is a club like this which is organizing tours for women, which was just because of an ad I placed there in a free listing, then they contacted me and even did an interview. So, it flowed. It just, one thing kind of just flowed into another. So it was, I would say, a very psychedelic experience in many ways in terms of how the whole thing really flowed. And so that's how I initially started. And a lot of word of mouth. Like I told a lot of my close friends as well, women friends, that look, I'm starting. So some of my first few clients were also, just maybe 2-3 of them were also people who already knew me and trusted me. So it was a mishmash of like word of mouth and using these free listings in newspapers and magazines. Like it was a combination. And over a period of time, I think it largely grew word of mouth. Like I think women are great marketers. Like if they love something, 100 women will get to know. If they don't like something, 500 women will get to know. That's also that side.
Yeah.
So that has also pushed me to up my standards, because I'm like, even if I take up a few trips, they have to be quality trips, because I'm looking to give the highest value possible to women. Because if they're happy, they will happily talk about it, and I don't even have to even think of advertising. In fact, I would say I've had very, very limited advertising in the last 13 years. It's been a very, very organic growth. So that's the way in which the business has shaped up over the years. So,
it's clear
and of course, besides that, once Facebook came on the scene, we were doing some Facebook ads, and all of that also happened later. But the origin of it was this.
It's very much clear that you literally love what you do, and like we should really love what we do, else we should just switch our professions like you did. So if I ask you, is there anything that is specific that you love the most about this travel club, or this entire journey that you have been through?
So I think So I think for me, the number one thing is that more than what I think I have given to women in terms of experiences, for me, I think it's just the privilege of the kind of women travelers that I have had an opportunity to meet and interact with. I want to give a couple of examples. So for example, I met this lady on a trip to Turkey that I had organized. She was traveling with us. She was 80 plus, Gujarati lady again, wearing a sari and like the typical, traditional look. She tells me how she started traveling solo when she was 16, to Europe. And she used to wear a ghagra choli, and that was her costume, right? And she had gone to Moulin Rouge in Paris, wearing a ghagra choli, She's now 85 or something. And she's like, all the people who had come to watch the cabarets in Moulin Rouge, they were like, forget the cabaret, look at this lady, what is she wearing? What is this beautiful costume and the ghagra choli and all? And they started taking her photographs. And she was like, I was like the star of that was like the lady of the moment in the streets of Moulin Rouge, and I was totally like living it up. And like, my goodness, just the fact that I'm meeting a lady who's had this kind of an experience, for me, that is like my kick. That is my mojo. That's my reason for waking up and wanting to serve this, these kind of women, because I mean, how inspiring are they? Then I had this other group of ladies, all elderly women in the age bracket of like uh, 60 to 90. Okay, they went for an Arctic Circle trip for the Northern Lights in winter, and there was a lady. She was almost 90. Okay, so she wanted to travel to the Arctic Circle in winter, and very frail, thin lady. Okay, I'm like, I was a little scared. I'm like, I hope she survives this experience, because it's an intense experience. You're going to be like doing husky dog sledge riding, cruising for like 7-8 days. I'm like, how is she going to survive this experience? And her son was booking the tour for her. I said, are you sure your mom can do this? Because I'm getting palpitations. She's like, you please don't underestimate her. She's tough as in, like really, really tough. Okay, so she will do this. I'm like, okay. She went and she was absolutely fine. I mean, no problems at all. Okay? So it is all in the mind. And in the same trip, there was another lady. She was a little younger, but also like in that same age group. 15 days before the trip, she fractured her arm. Okay, and the doctor said, no, you can't go for the trip. She's like, listen, I am going to go for this trip. And it was a non-refundable cruise. Okay? So she's like, I'm going to become better and I'm going to go for the cruise. So don't tell me I can't go. And she actually got better in 15 days, and she went and did everything, including like really intense trips like the husky sledge ride and all that, which is not a joke by any standards of imagination. So I'm like, who are these women? I want like to be like these people. So I'm like, I mean, that is the fuel that they have given me to keep motivating me on a daily basis and keep me going, because I'm like, it's a privilege for me to work for them. And even on times when I have been really down and out, and of course, as in every business, there are highs and lows and all that. And there have been moments where I've questioned a lot of things. It's just it's been amazing how organically, like some client would call me up and she's like, oh, Piya, we're waiting for the next trip, and when are you starting, and this and that. There has always been a flow of encouragement and support that's been coming in, even when I'm least expecting it. And it's always like pulled me out of the doldrums and pushed me out there that go, just perform and just keep doing the work, and things will be okay. So I think for me, the number one thing has been the opportunity to just work for the most inspiring women around, who have really not let barriers of age, health, society, they've challenged everything. So and I must also add, so I've been doing some research on the history of Indian women traveling. So we have this concept that Indian women have always been homebound and repressed and all of that. And today we are in a much more modern phase, which is largely true to some extent. But my research shows that women have been traveling solo, Indian women, since the 1870s. Okay, they've been doing long distance voyages. It's just that we don't know about these stories. Okay, so there is a whole parallel narrative that has been building up. When you look at Indian women travelers, there was a trickle that started off in those days. But when you see some of their travelogues, there's this one lady whose travelogue, I think, has now been translated into English, where she talked about how she did a long voyage to Europe, and she used to wear a sari and all that, and she was seasick and everything, and language issues. And then she talked about how she reached Europe, and then she was saving on money by making her own sandwiches and stuff like we would also do when we go to Europe right now. So she was writing that time, but it's still applicable to us when we go for our solo trips or backpacking to Europe, So I'm like, this is also a history that needs to be documented and told. The resilience that women in India, at least, have shown over the ages to challenge all kinds of social norms, to be traveling solo. Today it is at the peak, What started off as a trickle is now a wave. Like you can visibly see that there are many women who are backpacking on their own and traveling solo. Like even when I started off in 2008, there were not too many women. There were some, but it was not like a very known thing. But today it's masses. Today you can't ignore this anymore. I mean, one out of like every say 30 women, I could be on a very conservative side, I'm talking of urban cities, has done a solo trip on their own, or or are looking to plan, or they are in the process. So today it is really at the peak, or at least heading for the peak, and it's only going to get more, like, more numbers are going to be joining in the future. So we just need to now start looking at Indian women very differently, both in terms of the history of Indian women travelers and how they have been historically breaking norms, challenging all social stereotypes and traveling on their own. And right now as well, we also need to recognize that this is a historical event that has been happening, which has just been undocumented. And this is going to help us to perceive Indian women in a very, very different light. So I think this needs to be recognized and acknowledged. And I also feel this will also be perhaps an encouragement for even the government to put more processes in place, more infrastructure in place, so that Indian women can travel more in a more comfortable and a more safe manner. Come up with more, say, women-only hotels, for example. This is something I have been discussing about with a lot of women travelers, and they're like, look, if we have women-only hotels with a lot of facilities for women, like, say, single mothers traveling, for, say, child support and pet-friendly hotels for women. Many things can be done where safety aspects can be looked into more. More and more women will travel. So we need to acknowledge this as a trend, that Indian women need to be seen very differently now as travelers who are looking to explore boundaries outside of their house. And the most important thing is that once they have traveled the world and seen everything, they are going to bring back all those experiences to improve things within their families, within their communities, and within their societies. So it is extremely important that Indian women actually travel out, go out into the world, see things that are happening, and start altering their micro environments. So that is how important women's travel is in the larger context. So it's not just about traveling from place A to place B. It's the whole tapestry. So that's what I want to kind of bring attention. So yeah. So for me,
yeah, I really love and appreciate what you do, like I seriously do not want to end this, but reaching the end of the podcast. So before I part ways with you, do you have parting ways to let our listeners inspire them? Like, your journey has already been a source of inspiration, but is there anything else that you would like to add on?
So there is this one sort of quote that I live by, that the person who's leading the orchestra has to turn his back to the crowd. And I think that's very important for us to remember, because often in our entrepreneurial journeys, or if you're starting something, there's going to be a lot of noise. People are going to have 101 opinions of what we should do, what we should not do. But if you really need to stay focused, and you've taken all the advice and all, but somewhere you also have to turn your back to the crowd to be able to entertain the crowd. You're performing for them only, but you also have to turn your back to all the advice that you do not necessarily need, and just stay focused on the performance. So that has been one of the guiding, things that I have lived by, which has really, really shaped my experience. So that is one suggestion that I would have for anybody who's looking to start like a entrepreneurial journey, that just stay absolutely focused on what it is that your heart really desires to achieve. So, yeah.
So, what's the moral of the story? Follow your passion, explore and find out what you're good at. On that note, I would like to end this episode of the Changemakers of Mentogram. Stay tuned for more such inspiring stories. Until the next time, I'm your host, Pratiksha.